Kia ora everybody, and welcome to this webinar hosted by the Aotearoa Circle on energy hardship in Aotearoa. I'd like to start with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ke te uru, whakataka te hau ke te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ke uta, kia mā taratara ke tai. E hi aki ana te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga. Te hei Māori ora. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Angela Ogier. I'm with EY and we're the Secretariat of the Low Carbon Energy Roadmap. I'm really excited to be joined by Ezra Hirawani, who is the founder of Naumara, a social enterprise for energy retail. I wanted to just we'll let Ezra go through some of his journey in creating Naumara. We'll be running this as a bit of a conversation about energy hardship. Ezra, and I'll be asking Ezra some questions, and then we'll get some questions from the floor. There's not that many of us on the call today, so if you do have a question, just pop your hand up. There's a little button down the bottom called reactions. And you can pop your hand up there and we can, you can take yourself off mute and ask the question as we go through. If I can ask you to mute during most of the call, that'd be great, just so that everyone can hear what's going on. So energy hardship in New Zealand is something I think we are all grappling with. The average New Zealand household spends around 5% of their weekly budget on household energy, but for those of our lowest income household, that increases to 8%, and so that's telling in itself. But what really is probably hidden is that doesn't necessarily mean that households are actually spending what they need to spend on energy, because they may just be turning it off and being cold. And we can tell that by New Zealand's energy intensity of residential space heating is among the lowest in IEA countries. And that's despite only 45% of houses having sufficient roof insulation. So that means that it's likely people are going cold and not being able to spend what they need to spend on to keep themselves warm. And when you combine that with transport, energy for transport, it makes up 16 to 17% of weekly expenditure. The trickiest thing we've found in the energy roadmap journey has been that it is hard to define energy hardship. We know that over 100,000 households can't afford to heat their homes adequately, or that's around 6% of our households. And from there was a recent definition report from the Energy Networks Association using the UK's definition of energy hardship. And that would be that 10 people setting a threshold of 10% of energy of household income for being able to keep your house sufficiently warm. And that found that only 25% of New Zealand households are in energy hardship. And we know that this is a tricky issue to define. It's a tricky issue to work through, and that we do need to do some work on this as a nation. And it's combined with our poor housing stock and other issues that we have with low penetration of public transport. So I'm really happy to have Ezra here, who's been working in this space. He has really interesting background, and he's based in Hamilton, has a marketing background, and has moved into creating Naumara as a social enterprise to address energy hardship. When I was looking at, as you do, you start Google stalking who Ezra is, and you find out some really interesting things. He's spent a year in the Australian outback with Aboriginal people, and I was quite fascinated by that. And we had some good stories on the hardships faced by those people. So he has also spent time in China and is a Mandarin speaker. So someone who has a huge number of talents that he can apply to a problem. So I think it would be really good for us to learn a little bit about what he's done, and I'd like him to give us an overview of what led you to creating Ngā Mai Rā and embarking on this journey around energy. Ezra.
Well, thanks for that, Angela, and morena everyone. In terms of creating Ngā Mai Rā and doing what we're doing now, we kind of, I guess, fell into the position that we're in at the moment. So I had the opportunity to sit as a fly on the wall for another power company that we were building a few years ago now. And then I actually saw a lot of opportunity to make a bit of coin. And so I thought, like, could we do something? Could I build my own? And obviously, if you look at my experience, I don't have very much in the electricity industry, and so I didn't really understand what I'd be getting into if I was to do that. And if I hadn't known, I probably wouldn't have got in. Now that I do know what I do know, but anyway, went for it with the ambition to basically connect people again with Te Ao Māori. So using a social enterprise model to be able to allow people to I guess use their power to give back to their personal marae, or to people who want to contribute to heritage assets here in Aotearoa. But then as we started going along our journey, we started to understand a lot of the social inequities that existed in the electricity industry, particularly around energy hardship. And we initially ignored a lot of the things that we were learning about consumers and our own people within the industry. But as we kind of grew more and more in terms of our awareness and what we were offering, more and more iwi started to reach out and explaining to us much of the hardship that many of their whānau go through in their struggle for power. And so I got to this point where we were sitting on the couch one day, me and Ben, and looking at each other, thinking we are the most unqualified people to launch into a space that probably hasn't been solved in a long time. We questioned ourselves whether we were adequate enough to do the job if we were to go down the route of eliminating energy hardship and put our hat in the ring a little bit in that sector. But we almost felt like we didn't have a choice because of what we were learning, and because our own personal whānau were also wanting us to do it as well. And so, being Taina in the industry, we kind of took on the challenge. Initially quite hesitant to do so, but it's been quite rewarding as we've pivoted our business into this.
Let's go.
Yeah, that's kind of what drove us to, I guess, to answer the question, we started for one reason, and then as we continued to learn on our journey, we pivoted into the energy hardship space and been here ever since.
So what's the exact service that on value proposition for Ngā Mai Rā? What is it that you're offering to people?
Yeah, so obviously we sell power just like everyone else, but our wero to Aotearoa is do more with your power. So you can choose between getting power and convenience. So your multi-utility kind of a bill where you have your gas, you have everything all combined in one. You can choose an option where you get power and a free hour of power, or you can choose power and get a washing machine. What we kind of again wero to Aotearoa is, with us, there's no gifts or gimmicks or anything, but it's more so you can use your power as a way to give back to community organizations that you believe in and support. So for example, you can pay your power bill at the same price or cheaper rate than what you're paying now, and then donate a portion through koha of your power bill to an organization or kaupapa that you support. For example, we established the whānau fund, which is what we use to help whānau who are in extreme energy hardship, who can't afford to pay their power bill. So people can basically pay their power with us and then contribute a portion of their bill into that fund that we can then pass through to consumers who are really struggling through different ways, but to be able to help them cover the cost of energy. So
yeah. And what's been the tricky thing in setting that up? Has it, or the biggest barriers to setting up that service?
I think like most things in the industry, all the smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of people who said we couldn't do things only, and then we only to find out if we digged a little further that we could do them. Because like I think, as you'll see in my experience, I think my lack of experience has probably been, and also Ben's lack of experience has been our biggest strength, because we haven't been afraid to. Well, we didn't really know what questions we couldn't ask and we could ask. And so basically, because we're relying on feedback from our whānau or from iwi or from different people that we're engaging with, we basically formulated those into questions and then put them to the people who could make change. And then because of that process, we've been able to do a lot of what we've been able to do. But initially it was, no, it's too hard to do that. The industry's not set up for small players. The industry's not set up to deliver a model in such a way. The industry doesn't let you retailers of your size enter into PPAs or ISDA agreements to purchase hedges to get OTCs, which is a lie, because I mean we did it, but because of a lot of that that corridor was coming through, we kind of felt trapped in an invisible room. So we basically, there were no barriers to making change. It's just people didn't want to make change, and as soon as we started to find that out, things became a little bit easier. Yeah, not easy at all, but we're able to make change faster. But yeah, that was the biggest barrier.
Yeah. And so was there like a someone who helped you out with that, or was that just persistence and going around keeping asking the question that solved that got you through those hurdles?
Yeah, we've got a team of power avengers, is what we call them. And so basically, like when we first started, they were flying in to help us, from all over the country, just kind of phrase our questions in the right way. So when we asked the questions, the people that were receiving them knew what we were saying, rather than just from our normal whānau speak. And simply we united on the fact that the guys we're working with in terms of our power avengers is every time they touch the industry, power prices went up. And so, they've been able to help us. They basically come out of retirement with the ambition that the next time that they touch the power industry, that the price would go down. And so, no, heavily not that. Well, they're not Māori. Not that means anything, but basically we value aligned on, what we can do for whānau living in energy hardship.
So having someone to translate the industry into normal speak was really important then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And as well as, like, they didn't really tell us what wasn't possible and what was possible. They just we asked them something and they would just translate it. So we'd often head into meetings, traditionally probably want to have more of a heads up, but I think that was by design on their behalf, because if we had the heads up, we'd probably enter into the meeting with a bit more fear in our questioning. But yeah, hugely valuable to our process.
And how did you connect with those needing help, and how are you joining these people up? Are they people that are coming forward, or how are you connecting with the people that you're helping?
Yeah, really easy actually, because we are the people. So like my nan's one, my other nan's one, my cousins are them, and so you start with them, and then they start telling their friends, and then they start telling our wider whānau, and then the wider whānau tell the other whānau, and then it gets back to the iwi, and the iwi get their tribal members involved, and just kind of it's the kumara vine really. We've spent no money on marketing today, and it's all just come through the voice of whānau, which is something that we feel the industry's missed, completely missed. Because I mean, I understand what you're saying earlier around how tricky it is to define energy hardship. And I believe that's true to some extent, but I feel like most of our whānau could define it, like in 20 minutes, if we got them together and, like you said, what is, because I mean they're in it, right? Like they are struggling to pay their power bill, and so like a definition from them might look different to what it might come out in a formal report or something, but it's predominantly their problem. So yeah,
kia ora. I think, I mean, what would be the typical energy hardship issues you're hearing from the whānau?
Are you asking like what what causes them to not pay their bill, or what
Yeah, and what how are they dealing with it? And how are they dealing with what they're playing? Are the assumptions that we have around the way that they're dealing with their bill and the way that they're able to cope correct?
Well, I mean, how they cope is by rationing power or self-disconnection. And we have no stats on this at all, but it's more so when we're talking to customers who come through in hardship, these are like the common themes that occur. Like, I might have to go the weekend without power because I've got whānau coming over. Or sorry, I might go a few days this week without power because I've got whānau coming over. And so they're cold for 3 days or 3 days of the 7 a week. And another thing that leads to energy hardship is from what our customers are saying over the phone, is shame. And that's something that we're trying to really work with our consumers on. And so they fall in and out of hardship. And then there's this amount of shame because of the kind of communications that they get from electricity retailers. Like, if you do not pay your bill, we're going to disconnect. And then you get a text saying pay your bill or we'll disconnect. And then you get multiple phone calls from a private number all coming to disconnect your power. And so there's, that for our whānau, that's very mana degrading. So what basically we try and pivot around, what their behaviors are, how they respond to things, and we've got a really good positive result out of it. But in terms of the question around typical energy poverty issues and what they're doing to survive and cope with the impacts, is they find cheaper ways to heat their home, they rationalize power, or they self-disconnect. And so cheaper ways are like having those gas heaters in the house, or using their ovens to heat their homes. Those are the things that they're doing, is because they believe they're cheaper for their whānau to heat their homes with, rather than turning on the heat pump.
Yeah.
So, and it's quite disturbing to hear, when you're on the phone with our whānau, they're being completely vulnerable with you. And you just can only promise them you try your best to help them out of the situation. But yeah.
And the help you're providing is, it is financial, but is there also, is there a role for energy efficiency or that kind of help, or is it really we need to sort out paying for the power, and then once they're stable, we can talk about improving their any practices around energy?
Yeah, I think like what we try to do is, rather than financial support, because we prefer not to do that, we kind of provide more of an earlier intervention kind of a approach. And so rather, before they get, like, so you can't join No Maira without talking to us. Like it's very whakawhanaungatanga up front. And so we have about a 10-minute korero with them, understanding who they are as a person, where they whakapapa back to, how many kids they have, and we try and, as much as we can, to connect with them, to let them know that if they run into issues, that just reach out. We're just like them, we're willing to talk, have a conversation. And there's always a workaround in the industry. There's always someone willing to help in particular different in multiple ways, and it's basically allowing them to be able to tell you what they need help with, and then connecting them with the right place. Because sometimes it's price and sometimes it's not, so it's not all about price, though price is a huge factor in it. But it might be that they just need a couple of rattlesnakes for under the door, or better insulation will drop their bill by a whole ton. And there's some cool things like Energy Make out there that does a lot of this kind of stuff, and we've had some really cool interactions with Energy Make. But it needs to be more of that kind of stuff, and rather than people competing over who's going to do it, more of a united effort on how we approach, serving the problem.
And so, that leads to a kind of question about if we're traveling, are we traveling in the right direction on energy poverty? Are we doing the right things?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I really like the word traveling, because, I think about, as soon as you said the word traveling, I remember it was my birthday when I was younger, and I didn't grow up in a poverty-stricken family, but I didn't grow up in a wealthy family. And my mother asked me, I knew she didn't have much money, if I wanted to get the shoes that I always wanted, or if I wanted to go on a really cool trip to Australia. And she obviously knew I wanted to go to the trip to Australia. And so I opted for Australia, and the Australia trip still hasn't happened. And so in terms of travel, like travel involves booking something. It involves so basically, are we traveling? Like what has been done? Like what has been booked in regards to energy hardship? Or are we just making plans and extending false offers? But I've kind of pulled away from a lot of the the tables that talk about this stuff, because I found in terms of traveling, nothing's been booked. Like it's a lot of korero, and great korero at that, like a lot of cool things that have been spoken about, but nothing actually being done for the people on the other end of the phone. Because to them, it looks like a false offer of going to Australia. There's a lot of talk going on, but for them, it's like, well, I'm still disconnecting. I'm still rationalizing my power. Everything going on, or the conversations that are happening to our whānau, like nothing's really happening for them. There's a lot of motion, but not, there's a lot of activity, but I'd argue productivity. And there's a lot of cool things that could be done quite quickly if we're willing to work together. And that's kind of Nomada's position, is how can we basically have, get movement faster, rather than, talking around the flight center desk, pretending to book a flight. So, and I mean, I know that sounds harsh, and I wouldn't say that we're pretending to book a flight or pretending to do anything. But in terms of how we're tracking, like it's, the EPR is way behind in terms of, the dates that they kind of mentioned, which I understand there are issues there, COVID and all that kind of stuff, restricting that kind of thing. But regardless, when you talk to those who are actually suffering an energy hardship, it's very apparent to them that they are still struggling. And so in their perspective, nothing's been done. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
And if there was a single biggest lever on energy hardship, what, from your perspective, what would it be?
We're really big on the manaakitanga hedge. That's something that we're pushing quite strongly with our generation partners, that we've just signed on, and also with the government. So basically, a manaakitanga hedge is we believe that the industry participants have the capability to create a pool of power that is of an historical average amount that can be accessed by community groups or those focusing on vulnerable consumers to be able to purchase cheaper wholesale prices to then deliver to that particular part of the market. And we've learned that that's actually really easy to achieve, as long as we're willing to work together. When I say really easy, I don't mean like it takes 5 minutes, but it's a lot easier than we thought it was when we first started promoting it. So if there's anything that I think the participants can do as an industry, is create a hedge product that all the generators pump wholesale energy into, to create a pool that can be accessed by retailers focusing on vulnerable consumers or different communities.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's I mean, that's a really interesting concept, and would, as you say, would provide a meaningful discount right now for people. So I wanted to thank Ezra for being volunteered for this. I think you've done a fabulous job. It's been really good, and I really enjoyed our chats and our interactions, and I'm so impressed with what you're doing. And you keep saying, I don't know anything about the energy industry, but I think that that's integral to your success, because being in a position where you don't accept no and you just keep working for your kaupapa, it's a really strong position to be in. So congratulations. And I think I'm just so privileged to have met you and to be able to learn more about what you're doing. And thanks for volunteering for today, or being volunteered and accepting.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Good.
Oh, so I'll just close with a karakia, and then we can move off to our day. So kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turu whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, haumia hui e taiki e. Thanks very much, whānau. It's been a really interesting chat, and thanks again to Ezra. Ka kite matewa.